All right. My intention today is to connect with my inner being and to help through that connection facilitate the connection to everybody else and everybody else's connection with their own inner being so that we can be led and following that inspirational trail to our highest purpose, our highest good. That's my intention for today, is that connection, and to have fun. Have a fun conversation with you, my man.
Hey, it's Bobby. Welcome to Student of Intention, where we help you enjoy the pursuit of purpose. And remember, don't wait, start small, learn as you go. Hey friends, welcome to Student of Intention, this little corner of the internet where we spark, strengthen, and support self-discovery. It's a beautiful refresh here in the Creative Palace. We have some different colored walls, some different pictures. The captain of the ship was busy at work and just makes for a cozy environment. So really excited to welcome my guest, Josh Church, to the show, which I'll speak to here in a moment. As is customary, I want to share a little story. This story is about one of transition and one of like being gentle on ourselves. What I found coming out of last weekend, which was a long weekend, it was the Labor Day weekend, was I kind of resisted coming back to my reality as much as my reality is amazing. I just selfishly had this wonderful weekend with my wife and my dog in Solvang, California, which if you don't know anything about Solvang, it's this weird tourist spot that's dedicated to the Danish culture. So a lot of bakeries, a lot of coffee, a lot of walking. But just an oddly peaceful, very unplugged weekend for me, my wife, and my pup. And so coming in, I even left on Sunday. You know, we left on Sunday thinking, I'll give myself some space on Monday to kind of get back into my habits, get back into, you know, how I live my life here in Southern California. And yet, even with that planning, I felt some resistance. I felt sort of out of place. On Tuesday morning, I remember being like, man, I don't know. I don't feel like writing my newsletter. I don't feel like preparing for the podcast. I don't feel like, going back into my training mode, which I'm training for a half-Ironman right now. And I was just like, it's like, I don't know. I was sort of holding on to this weekend that was just so beautiful, and I kind of wanted to go back. And the thing that I would share that I'm just really grateful for is that I set up all of these little systems, we'll say, to sort of, even through that tough, mucky, like challenging moment where my mindset just wasn't right, where my motivation just wasn't there. I had these things that sort of made it easy. I had my morning pages journal sitting right next to my bed. So when I woke up that Tuesday morning, I could still bang out a few pages, and it wasn't my best morning pages, but I got it done. I still had my newsletter idea that I had put in place in my notepad earlier in the week. And so I cranked it out. I delivered it an hour later than I normally do, but I got it done. I connected with a few folks on LinkedIn. I had my, some of my client calls. And the moral of the story is like, hey, even if we're not like up to the task, even if we're not feeling our best self, if we have some things in place, some practices, some systems, like getting something done is better than not doing it. Some sort of consistency, some sort of continuity will lead back into that flow, back into that alignment. And that's what happened. I was gentle with myself. I was patient. I didn't overthink it. And then by today, coming into this conversation with Josh, I'm feeling really good. So I'll leave you with this. I actually wrote this at the top of the newsletter. You don't have to climb the mountain today. Just lace up the boots. And so with that, we'll transition to my guest today, Josh, who I think knows all sorts of good stuff about being gentle with ourselves, about starting small, about creating systems and processes. Josh hosts the Find the Others podcast. If you use Instagram, he's just an awesome follow. He's one of my favorites because he's always regular posting inspiring, thoughtful highlights from the pod. Speaking of systems, he also runs operations for high impact coaching. helping nutritionists, relationship experts, holistic healers, mindset and transformational coaches, all the coaches build profitable and sustainable businesses. I'm sincerely stoked to have you on the show. Welcome to Student of Intention, Josh.
Oh, thank you. This has been a long time coming, and I'm grateful to be here and happy to sit down with you, man.
Yes. Long time coming. So we had a really interesting way of coming into contact with each other. One of my favorite people in the world, Christina Lim, my sister-in-law, she's the twin sister of my wife, Tracy. When I started down my path of living with intention, of writing my book, of starting my podcast and the newsletter, she just said, as the universe does, she said, hey, like there's this guy, I don't know why, I feel compelled to make an introduction. And sure enough, as soon as I saw your Instagram, and as soon as we connected, I was like, I'm just super grateful for this guy to come into my life. And I think that was like almost a year ago.
Yeah, it was probably right around a year ago. Yeah, I mean, amazing. Like we talk about follow the breadcrumbs, like you're on the yellow brick road, the people, the opportunities, the connections happen. And I know we're just beginning our relationship as well. So like, I'm so excited to think about like what happens 10 years from now, 15 years from now, like where does this all continue to lead to? So it's very cool. And yeah, shout out to Christina for sure for making that introduction.
Yeah. And there's, and patience too, right? Like I agree, 10 years, 15 years, that's what gets me excited. And you and I think planned to talk on a podcast like 6 or 7 months ago and it didn't happen. And, don't sweat it. Like we have, beautiful, abundant lives. And now like when it happens, it happens. So here we are.
Right. In perfect timing.
That's right. So, I want to start with a story from you. Before we talk about some of the other things, I want to get an update on your pod. I want to get an update on things at High Impact Coaching. But I just started with a little story of my own, and I stumbled on a story of yours on Instagram the other day. I don't know if you remember. You should remember posting this. This is only a week ago. You posted something that started off with, "It seemed so perfect." And it was this little story of you hanging pictures in your room. And the reason I really like gravitated to it is because that's how I kind of see the world. I kind of see this world of living with intention through short stories and what we can kind of take away from these little brief moments of realization, of action, etc. Can you share a little bit more about that story and give some context to the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I talk about that story too, I think that that's a really helpful frame that you and I both share. And I think that's why we connected really deeply and right away too, is that I love the storyteller mode and I love stories and I love telling stories, but I love looking, it just reminds me of the Einstein quote. There's 2 ways to look at life. One is that everything's a miracle. The other is that nothing is. And I really feel that way. And when you can start to observe yourself from kind of like this higher place, or you can see yourself as a character, like a movie character in a movie or a character in your favorite book going through life, like every interaction, every experience, every moment, there's something to learn. Like there's something that you can gain from every interaction. I really believe that. I know you believe that too. And when you believe that, you can start to gain insight from all of these different places that you wouldn't normally expect it. So something as mundane as hanging pictures on my wall opens me up to this insight that helps me learn and grow, and I'm able to share, and by virtue of doing that is hopefully able to help others learn and grow. So I think it's just such a helpful like frame of looking at things, and stems from that belief of like things are happening for you and there's something to learn from every experience, really that growth mindset. So
100%.
That being said, I started hanging photos in my new apartment over here, and I'm hanging photos and I'm just super I don't know if everybody can relate to this as well. I didn't have a leveler with me, which is a very, very helpful, useful tool when you're by yourself. And so I'm like, I'm lining it up on the wall. I'm like, this looks like the center here. Like this has to be straight. I'm looking at it like this is straight. I hammer in the nails hanging up and I take a step back and it's like so obviously crooked. I'm just like, how the heck how was I so off? Like when I was up close, it seemed so perfect. It seemed so centered. It seemed so aligned. And then I took a step back and I'm like, whoa, this is way off. And that just led to the insight for me of like, what we can be really close to our problems. And in our life, we can be so close to something that it seems so perfect. But as soon as we take a step back, as soon as we pick our head up and we look around, then we can realize where that sits in context to everything else. And we might have a different perspective on it. And this is one of the reasons why I will always invest in coaching in myself, and why I love coaching others also, is to be able to provide that perspective when someone is up close to their problem, to be able to kind of step back and spot them and say, hey, go a little bit to the right. Like, okay, a little bit more, tilt it a little bit more to the left. Now, perfect. There you go. That's it. Like, okay, cool. Are you sure? Like, this doesn't look right. Trust me. I got you. Okay, I'm trusting you. Nail it in. Take a step back. Oh, of course. It's perfect. You were right. So it's just such a kind of cheeky story that highlights that relationship that I think we have with ourselves, with our own problems, and with other people around us supporting us, the right friends, families, family members, mentors, getting those people in your corner who will help you and call you out. And even if you're so set on being like, no, this is perfect, to be like, hey, dude, I just want to let you know, this is how I'm seeing it from my perspective. Take it with a grain of salt, but like, it's a little bit crooked. You want to straighten it out a little bit more. So that was the story of how it led to that realization, which was a fun Tuesday night insight.
Oh man, for sure. And it's those little tiny moments, you're hanging your pictures up in your wall. You don't have a level, and this sort of light bulb goes off where you're just like, wow, boy, was I wrong. Like, I thought this looked straight. I thought this looked great. But when I can take a step back, literally, I can see like, I just didn't see what was there is not what I saw. And you shared so many good lessons in that last response. Like, one, we don't romanticize our life enough. We don't really take a second to just be like, holy crap, like, this is awesome. Whether it's hanging photos, whether it's taking a run outside, whether it's just drinking a cup of coffee on a beautiful morning here in Southern California, right? Like, we really are chock full of just these abundant experiences. And that's really what life is about. And I think that's what you kind of mentioned or touched on with regards to storytelling. That helps sort of evoke that romanticism with our lives. And then B, the awareness of understanding that, hey, things aren't always what they seem, or maybe I need to widen the lens of myself a little bit. And then C, you can get help with that through coaches. You can get help with that through peers, through mentors, through conversation. Love it, man.
Certainly. Yeah, it's a powerful thing. And you mentioned that you're training for half-Ironman right now.
That's right. October 23rd, La Quinta. It's my first one. I'm nervous and excited.
La Quinta. Awesome. That's great. You're going to crush it. I've done a number of 70.3s and trained up for full one as well. And one of the things that I'm sure you've learned through this process, and it's a similar thing, and I've usually shared this story to capture a similar concept of being able to pick your head up around. I learned this lesson when I was doing a bunch of half Ironmans as well, and doing open water swimming. When you're in the pool, you've got the swim lane, you're good. But when you're in the open water, open ocean, or a lake, you need to be able to pick your head up every now and then to be able to sight where you're going and make little course corrections to adjust, because naturally we're going to veer off course. And one of the takeaways from that is that little micro movements, like, you're not going to notice over 10, 15 strokes. You're not going to notice. You're going to stay pretty straight. But over 50, 75, 100 strokes, you're going to go off path. So these little micro actions can compound and take us off a very different course. So that's one takeaway from that. But we also need to pick our head up to be able to make those micro adjustments. So swim, pick your head up. Oh, I got to go a little bit more left. Put your head down, swim. Pick your head back up. Okay, cool. I'm right on. Let's keep this pace. Head down, swim. And when you do that, you can have a successful race. Otherwise, you see a lot of people that go way off course, and then they have to like double back, course correct, and go way off the other direction. So they end up swimming like double the amount than you would swim. So that's a similar theme of being able to pick your head up, take a second, see where you're at, reassess your situation, and make those micro shifts, and then keep going.
I love it. This is a perfect segue actually into your story, or at least how I sort of break down the idea of living with intention. And I want to weave your story through this map. So I break it down as a 3-phased approach. It starts with action, right? So in your swimming metaphor, right? Like you don't even get that perspective until you're 50 yards in, until you're 100 yards in. You don't even sort of earn being off course per se until you are on the course, right? Until you've started.
That's right.
And then you go through the second phase, which is discovery. That's where you start to peek your head up and gain awareness that you didn't have before and start to course correct as you go along. And then the last is alignment. And so we'll kind of go through those three. And alignment's people, resources, maybe a wind at your back. in the race metaphor. So we'll go through those different phases with regards to your story. But I want to start with your story with regards to action and specifically your podcast. So, I see you going through 3 different journeys. You're probably going through 100, but I at least break it down to your podcast that started back in November 2020. The startup that you're very much a big part of over at High Impact Coaching. And then I think your role as an operator, your role as operations is its own journey. But I want to start the podcast because you started it right around the same time I started my own journey here with Student of Intention. I think it was in November of 2020. And I checked out your first episode. Thank you for just saying start here real big. And, and it was a really cool first episode. It was like a 20-minute monologue, laying out, exactly what the listener can expect. Some other just interesting points and background on yourself. I thought in particular, you I think it was this quote, your life changes the moment you make a new, congruent, and committed decision. I really like that. That's a Tony Robbins quote. Is that right?
That is. Yep. Papa Tony.
So I assume just starting that podcast in November 2020, like that was a new, congruent and committed decision, right?
Yeah, it sure was. And it was a long time coming, right? It was like, I'm sure with you too, with starting Student of Intention, like it wasn't a new idea, but the decision to go forward at least and express it in this way was new and committed. And so for me, that was, I'd been sitting with the idea of doing a podcast for a while. I had a lot of people throughout the years say, "Oh, you should do a podcast." I would totally listen. And though it was tempting to do it for those reasons, I was like, "No, I'm not going to do it just because you can doesn't mean you should." Right? That's an important lesson I've learned. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. But I sat with it until I got to the point where I realized I'm actually ready to do this, and I want to do this for the long haul. And I want to do this. I want to make a decision to do this and commit to doing this for what I know it will bring me and how it will impact my growth. So once I kind of came to that realization, it was a no-brainer to be like, all right, like let's press go and let's see what happens. And now we're almost 100 episodes later, coming up on the year mark. And it's been such a fun thing for myself. Oh,
for sure. For sure. And we'll get to that. You said something else really interesting in that first episode that I want to get some clarity on, or if there's some more context. You talked about your perceived rock bottom. And as I think with any of these moments where we make new, congruent, and committed decisions, they have all kinds of different catalysts, right? It can be opportunistic. It can be a stroke of inspiration, but I think largely it's usually out of pain, or it's usually out of trauma or a perceived rock bottom. It definitely was for me. Like like you said, it was definitely a long time coming, and there was a lot of things that led to it. But there was this specific couple of months where I was like, I was just really tired of how I was living life. I was in my own perceived rock bottom. Again, you mentioned it, but you didn't really go into detail. Is that something that you experienced before that, starting that in November 2020, or is that in reference to other folks and their own journeys?
A little bit of both. That's a great question. The perceived rock bottom, like there's 2 places I believe that we can really grow from. And I believe it's a Buddhist philosophy on Kensho and Satori. I'm not sure if you've heard of those 2 concepts, but there's the idea of Kensho and Satori. And Kensho is growth through like heart opening and through pain and through suffering. Basically, it's experiencing like pain that leads to growth. And then Satori is like insight. It's growth that is experienced by way of insight or divine inspiration or revelation or learning in that way. And so like I've always kind of liked those 2 ideas of learning and looking at growth. And I kind of see it as like there's like kind of it's being planted in the ground, or it's growing up. It's a combination of both, I think, for a lot of people. But I've always kind of liked that way of looking at it. So specifically right before the podcast, leading up to deciding to do the podcast, that was really coming from more of an inspired decision to do so, not from a rock bottom then. But the perceived rock bottom, I think, is something really, really useful, is that we can, and this is a big thing that I think coaching can really help with also, is it can help you take action before you actually hit that rock bottom, where you can get to that perceived rock bottom before you actually physically take yourself there. And you can make those changes before you drag it out, or you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah. So that I had that perceived rock bottom, if you will, which kind of felt like a rock bottom. And it's interesting, it's all totally subjective and relative. But for me, it came from like checking all the boxes that I thought were going to make me happy and that I like was supposed to check. You know, I dropped out of school early. I still ended up graduating, but I left after my sophomore year to go work at a startup company in Silicon Valley. We had investors like Kobe Bryant and Oprah, Tony Robbins. I met him in the office, raised over $150 million. And I was one of the first people on the marketing team there, and through pre-launch into our actual launch. And I had kind of checked the boxes and was like, okay, cool. Like, it's my senior year of college and everybody else is still at school, and I'm earning way more money than I thought was possible at this age. I have equity in this company. Like, I'm moved out to LA to open up the LA market. I have all this autonomy. I'm working with some of the most amazing, brilliant minds, people that created Amazon Kindle, people that like created these things that I use on a daily basis. Like, I checked the boxes, and then I kind of looked up and was like, well, now what? Like, I got there for what I thought was, you know, any 22, 23-year-old kid's ideal. Like, I paved a different path, but now it's like, well, now what? Is this what I want to do? I looked up, I'm like, there's no more checkpoints now. Like, I'm here now. Like, what's the next step? And I didn't really know what that looked like. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I wanted to do that. That was a big thing. It was like, do I want to climb this mountain right now? Right. I found out, like, to use your analogy, lacing up the shoes or climbing the mountain. It's like, I was halfway up a mountain, it felt like, or I'd chosen like, this is the mountain I'm going to climb. I'd made some serious progress, but then I'm like, wait a sec, is this even the mountain that I want to climb? And so that was kind of the moment where I was just like, oh crap, like, what's going on here? Like, what do I want? And so I did what any responsible young man would do. And I quit my job and bought a one-way ticket to Southeast Asia and strapped on a backpack and went to go find myself on a giant quest, and learned a lot of insight from that. The primary being that you don't find yourself, but you can create yourself. And it was my choice and decision to create myself. And that led me on just this path of starting to ask myself and discover some of these aspects and natural abilities that I have, along with the areas where I feel really called to serve people, and led me into the education space and led me to connecting with very cool people. One of those being Xander Fryer, the founder of High Impact Coaching. And he was at a point where he was looking to bring on his first employee. Got in with him, and then the rest is history now after 20 employees. And we just made the Inc. 5000 list as well for fastest private growing companies, number 2 in the coaching space, actually, which is really exciting. So yeah, that's the condensed life story of the perceived rock bottom to kind of the path that it put me on, with lots more long story to fill in those details, but that's the framework right there.
Oh, dude, I haven't heard that. That is awesome. And you know, it's great that you can sort of say that tongue in cheek. You know, I did what any responsible kid would do. Yeah. I quit my job and bought a one-way ticket to Asia. But man, that's it. You took action, right? Like you did it in a moment of perceived rock bottom, in a moment of inspiration, a moment of someone in pain, like whatever you want to call it. Right. You did something about it. And, you know, that's really what I think that's what I write about. That's what I think about when I talk about intention, is just having that moment of awareness to be able to, and then have the opportunity to take action, to just do it, to make some mark, and then figure out the rest as you go along, which it sounds like you did.
That's it, man. Yeah. And it's that combination, right? It's like, it's a dance. You take a step, then the universe takes a step, right? It's like, it's a constant like give and take. It's a push and pull. It's a balance of like taking action and then like listening for the next step. It's a constant balance of like lining up the picture frame, hammering it in, right? Like taking a step back, going back up, making those adjustments. So it's just a constant balance. Yeah.
And I mean, I want to talk about so much more, but I just can't, for anybody listening, I think this is such an important piece of the puzzle, is like to just not shortchange what your own circumstances, not like overlook if a feeling feels bad, if like you sort of notice that maybe you're a little unhappy with a situation or it just doesn't feel right. Like in your circumstance, from the outside looking in, everybody's like, Josh, you're crazy. Like you are living the dream, right?
Absolutely.
You're part of this successful startup. You're making money. You're in LA. Like you have nothing but opportunity in front of you. Right. And there's a lot of people and external forces that could get you thinking that is right, even though internally you're like, no, there's something wrong.
Absolutely.
And that's what I went through. I talked to my mom the other day. My mom got my newsletter, and in it, I talk about this, like, crawling out of my own hole. And that's where the 5 buckets came from. That's where my book, Institute of Intention, came from. And I think it's really uncomfortable for my mom to be like, why were you ever in a hole? That just doesn't compute. Like, you've been successful your whole career, more successful than I, and you have a great wife, and you live in LA, and you blah, 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 blah. And I was like, Mom, like, honestly, my hole at that moment was I was just unsatisfied with how often I was not doing what I wanted to do. Like little things, right? Like I know I always wanted to work out more. I know I always wanted to do some endurance races, and I couldn't do it. I just wasn't choosing to do it, right? I wanted to eat differently than I was doing. I wasn't doing that. I wanted to connect with other people that I just wasn't doing. And so they were really small things, but it added up, and enough was enough.
It adds up quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's awesome, man. I didn't know that part of your story. And then, I guess let's bring it back to the podcast. So now you've done it for, you said over a whole year, hundreds of
just about to be over 100 episodes. Yeah. About to cross that year mark.
So what have you learned? What surprised you? Actually, let's use this. You used the phrase at the very beginning. You said, follow the yellow brick road. What's the yellow brick road look like, on this particular journey?
Dude, well, first off, shout out to the Yellow Brick Road. The Yellow Brick Road is the greatest. It's something that I'm so fascinated in, just like looking at from the meta level of like, it's the flow state. Like, everybody can relate to when there's those moments or days or those opportunities that like you can't make up, you can't force, you can't fake, but it's just like one thing led to the next and led to the next and led to this beautiful thing. And we're all on the Yellow Brick Road. A lot of us like are just have our blinders on, or like looking down at our feet and not seeing where this beautiful road can lead to. So I'm always like doing everything I can and doing the inner work to like be downstream on the Yellow Brick Road, because there's this amazing magnetism, there's this amazing flow of life, the stream of well-being and the stream of opportunity and experience, and you're leading you to your desires and leading you towards everything that we have the ability to tap into, and we have the ability to follow. And it takes a combination of action, of intuition. It takes a combination of all these things that I know you're talking about as well, to be able to be aware and then take the next steps and keep letting things unfold. So I view the Yellow Brick Road as just like, okay, cool. What's the next indicated step? Like, for a perfect example, our relationship and how we connected, like I was going to this gym and Christina was like this total go-getter that I would work out with all the time, because it was like the HIIT workout. So we would be partnered with each other. And I was just like, this chick is dope, and like she's a good person, and like I want to stay connected with her, because anybody that's gonna be in there at 5:30 a.m. crushing a workout, like that's those are my kind of people, right? And we stay connected on social media. And then she just reached out randomly and was just like, hey, I have someone I'd love for you to connect with, my brother-in-law. And there was no hesitation. I was just like, absolutely, yes. Like in my mind was like, cool. Like, I don't know who this dude is, but he's clearly part of my process. So I'm going to say yes and follow that. And then we connect, and then it leads to this opportunity to have this conversation, and who knows the ripple effect that this might have on even one person, but on many people. And then who knows what this leads to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. It's just like, it's this Yellow Brick Road that's just leading us towards all of our desires that we want. So I love the Yellow Brick Road. Shout out to that. And it's just fun to think about it that way. So
it does.
You can speak a lot on the Yellow Brick Road as well.
I know. I have to ask you, because this keeps coming up in my world. And so I'm just curious your take on this, because how you described the Yellow Brick Road and how you explained, I think you explained perfectly a situation where a person you trusted for a lot of reasons, and Christina introduced you to a person that she thought would be a good connection, and you just said yes, right? You didn't question it, you didn't take your time, and you dove right in. And again, I think it's our relationships in its infancy, but it's been positive on both sides.
Absolutely.
I think what's getting a lot of press in my world that I just see a lot is the power of saying no, which I get. I totally understand the context around it. And at the same time, I'm balancing this with like me more often. I subscribe to that perspective, which is I say yes. I say yes to new opportunity. I say yes to interesting and different things. I say yes to new relationships. Have you bumped up against those two sort of competing ideas, and are they competing, or am I just misreading them?
It's a great question. So I see them as two sides of the same coin. So like there's yes and there's no. It's the same coin. It's the same subject, right? So you can't say yes without also saying no, and you can't say no without also saying yes. What I mean by that is I had to say no to other things in order to have the bandwidth or the space to be able to say yes to an opportunity like connecting with you, for example. So and it just all depends on what you're optimizing for. If I'm optimizing, when I decided to train for full Ironman and I knew it was going to be 9 months of grueling training, I decided to say yes to that. And in return, I said no to a lot of social activities, a lot of going out. I didn't go out once for 6 months, right? Because the whole weekend you're training, as you know. So when you say, every time you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something. And so that's the way I look at making any decisions. It's like, okay, if I say yes to this, then what am I saying no to? If I say no to this, then what am I saying yes to? Let's say I might say no to going out with friends. Well, I'm saying yes to putting myself and my well-being first, or putting my training tomorrow morning first and foremost. That's what I'm saying yes to. So it really helps balance that out when it's like, know that every time you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. Every time you say no to something, you're also saying yes to something else. When I said yes to connecting with you, I was also saying no to that hour of work that I could have been doing, or that hour of maybe a surf that I could have been doing, or a workout, or a meeting with a potential client, right? So there's nothing is a yes without a no, and nothing is a no without also a yes. So that's why I think about it, and it really just balances out every decision, every equation, and it helps you really weigh like what the priorities of what do I want to say yes and no to. I'm sure you say no to a lot to be able to have space for this podcast and to be able to optimize for what you want, which is connecting with people and opportunities and new experiences, which I'm the same way. So I say no to a lot to keep that space to be able to say yes to those things.
That's a great way to look at it. I'm curious, do you get any more systematic about it than that? Or is it simply acknowledging, I know in the moment I'm saying yes to this and I'm saying no to some other things? Cause that's just another thing. And maybe that is, but for me, I'm sort of like, I'm just overwhelmed. Like maybe I'm not saying no enough. Maybe I'm not systematic enough, right? Like even the half-Ironman, I sort of committed on a whim because my boy Ryan was like, hey, I just had my second kid. I want to get back in the water. I want to do one of these things. If you say yes, I'll say yes. And I was like, dude, I want that experience. I've never done it. I'm in the best shape of my life. Let's go. But trust me, now I know every day I'm training, like I know I'm saying no to plenty. So do you get more systematic than that, or do you just leave it at that acknowledgement?
No, it's a great point. I think it starts with the acknowledgement, and it's a great mental exercise as well to be doing with every decision. And it just helps you evaluate the power of your decisions and the consequences for each decision you have, positive and negative. The way that I think about it too is it's kind of this constant game or dance of creating chaos and then minimizing it. Creating chaos, then minimizing it. So that's the way I look about it, which is like, I'll be in a yes season of life, and this can vary from literally week to week, or it can be a couple weeks to a couple weeks, or a month to month, where it's like some weeks I'll say yes to everything. And I'll just be like, I've got space. Like I'm going to say yes to this, to this, to this, to this, to this. I'm going to say yes until I feel full. I'm going to create all this chaos in my life. And I think a lot of people that are stagnant or just in the same routine, they're in a period where they need to create more chaos. Like it sounds kind of weird, but it's like, you need to create actually more chaos, more stress. Say yes to things. That's the easiest way to do it, is just start saying yes to all the opportunities until you're forced to say no. So and that's the way that I kind of look at it, is just like, say yes until you are forced to say no. Say yes until you have all these amazing opportunities and things that are brewing and connections and experiences to where like you have more than enough to where you want to just focus in on a couple of those things and say no to everything else. And then until those start to kind of be compressed or dwindle down, or those fade out, and then you go into another season of saying yes and then no. So it's like a season of saying yes and then a season of saying no, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. Well said, dude. I think I experience that literally every week, certainly for the last year. And I haven't said it so precisely. Say, and I sort of sense myself at times kind of craving chaos. Like, all right, let's go break this thing, bro. And then let's get overwhelmed and get a little freaked out and then rebuild it. And then, that's cool. It's an experience. That's
it, man.
So easy to say sometimes, like, is anything broken in your life? Have you created any chaos recently? Let's get real here on Joshua Church.
Yeah, I think, for me, and I'm very grateful that there's always an abundance of opportunities and opportunity, like specifically business opportunities of things to focus on, or, and one of the things that there's always chaos around that for me, which is just like, some person, there's an opportunity to work on something with this person, and I know it could be very beneficial or profitable, or could bring a lot of people a lot of great results. So like, do I do that thing? Do I do this thing? Like, there's no shortage of that. And I like to, sometimes I overcommit to some of those things where it's just like, yeah, let's do it. No problem. Great. Let's go. Like, let's create it. The thing that I've been learning, which helps a lot, which is just giving yourself more time, like lengthening the runway a bit. Instead of like saying yes to everything right now, it's like, say yes to things and give it a couple months, give it a couple weeks, give it a couple months. It doesn't have to be like a now thing. So if you can say yes to things and also not have that thing be a now, this takes top priority thing. So that's what I'm working on right now, learning and setting those expectations as I'm saying yes to certain things with people, being realistic about, if I'm in a, no season right now, being realistic about when I will be able to focus on this as a yes season. So that's kind of the real time things that I'm working through, specifically around like different business opportunities, because there's no shortage of them, and there's no shortage of amazing people to work on incredible things with and collaborate. Like, my favorite thing in the world to do is to work on class projects with cool people. Like, I love that. And that's what I'm doing all day long. And I love that. I want to work with all the classmates on all the cool projects, but I'm learning to be able to like, be like, hey, let's work on this next semester. I want to work on this with you, but let's do this next semester. I've got a full class load this semester.
I love it. Class projects with cool people.
That's it, bro. That's it. That's all we're doing over here.
Yeah. And I mean, you do that, I'm sure with your podcast, I'm sure with your relationships, but you do that for work as well. So let's give some context around your work at High Impact Coaching. Again, I think you're doing two journeys here. You're doing a journey of growing from what I remember, a business of 2 people to now a team of like 17, or has it gotten bigger since then?
23, man. 23, 24.
23, probably a handful of clients, now hundreds of clients. And that's interesting in and of itself, because I think when you go through that sort of growth, everybody has an operations hat of sorts, right? Like, everybody's job is to just implant process where there is none. And yet, specifically wearing the hat of head of operations, or director of operations, like, that's literally what you do every day is go bite off on projects with cool people. So what's that been like? And particularly, how do you prioritize and find projects? What's the latest, in that regard with how you're keeping yourself busy and motivated?
Yeah, definitely. So there's always a new challenge, which is great. That's why I love operations, because it's just like, to me, it's puzzle pieces, and you're solving puzzle. You're literally putting together puzzles, right? There's a problem. How do we do this in the most systematic way, in the most efficient way? How do we solve for this problem, and how can we do it? How can we do it in a it's just something so creative about that, which seems so counterintuitive, because like, I'm doing a lot of like custom coding, like web hooks, and creating automations online, and building out a lot of different processes, delegating a lot to the robots, like tens of thousands of tasks every single month to the robots. Shout out to the robots that are able to do a lot and automate things. And that seems like a very, a very analytical, very non-creative thing, but it is in a way. But to me, it's very creative, because it's just like, cool, here's the problem we want to solve. How can we solve this? Here's what we want to solve for. We want to be able to see this. We want to be able to figure out. And lately, to answer your question, it's been a lot around getting a lot more quantitative data around clients' progress through how they're performing, basically. So being able to know, like, what are the indicators that we can tell when a client needs help, or they might be at risk of falling off, or failing in their business? Like, what are some of these indicators that we have? Like, how can we measure their attendance on our group calls? How can we measure their data in a more reliable way? Like, how can we measure their progress as they're completing things and tasks that we send them to go through? So getting a little bit more quantitative around some of that data helps to make more objective decisions around clients. So that's some of the creative challenges I'm working on right now. But as you said, like, there is kind of these few different journeys or lanes. The interesting part is, for me, I really view it all as one. And it is through the lane of me, or the journey of me as the operator, and stepping into that. Because the stuff that I do on Find the Others podcast, like all the stuff that we talk about, the stuff that we're talking about here, all we're talking about is standard operating procedures for how to work our mind and our brain and our body in the world, right? Like, we're a computer that we're programming ourselves. And if we're not programming ourselves, we're getting programmed by other people. So, and media and culture and upbringings and all those things as well. So it's our responsibility to program ourselves. So I view all of the work from, I would always see those as two separate things. Like, you've got the self-development, the mindset, the creativity over here, and then you've got like operations over here. And I realized, wait a second, like, this is really all operating. It's just about how do we operate as human beings on planet Earth. Like, and that lights me up like no other. That's the stuff that really lights me up. And helping solve problems in people's businesses and help them come up with help them create scalable operations so they can scale their operation. Like, that lights me up just as much as well. So it really is kind of one journey that I'm going through. And I'm at a stage right now where we're getting the operation so dialed in that I'm able to like really step back from the day-to-day ops and focus on bigger picture stuff within HIC, within high impact coaching, and then also with some other clients as well to do some high leverage operations consulting with, which I really enjoy.
Man, I mean, to have it all integrated like that, and to understand that it's integrated, like, dude, just, you're ahead of your time, brother. That's great, and a really good perspective. Cause yeah, I've struggled with that, I think, for the last year of like, wait, I'm this guy over here and I'm this guy over here. But now I'm like slowly realizing, like, no, that's just silly. It's all operating, to use your word.
Yes.
So I have a selfish question about working with clients. Cause I do consulting. I think, naturally I have friends sort of peeking up their head and saying like, hey man, I wanted to write a book, or I wanted to do a podcast. And I'm always balancing this sort of, this dynamic of how to help somebody. I think one part, like, people can only help themselves. Like, I can't give them the keys. Like, even people will be like, tell me exactly how you wrote that book. Like, I want to know exactly how you got it out. And it's like, even if I give you that exact process and map, like, you're going to have to figure it out on your own. You're going to have to do your own thing. But people, like, they're literally like, they're sort of pushy. They really want it exactly. They want you to feed it to them. So part of me just wants to feed it to them precisely. Do you get some of that with your coaching? I'm curious how you balance that of like giving them the answers to the test versus just asking the right questions.
Yeah, it's a great question. We all want the shortcut. Like, we're wired for that, right? Like, we all want we want the system. We want the reliable thing. Like, here's the blueprint to double your income overnight. Like, it's sad that still works, right? Like, that those clickbaits still work and those lead magnets still work. Like,
it's because people really want it.
People really want it. Yeah. And here's the thing: if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it, right? And there wouldn't be a whole industry in this, right? So in the biz ops space, as we call it, the business opportunity space, wouldn't be. And it's a messy, big space, and it's not the most fun being in, because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of scammers, there's a lot of people that are trying to sell the magic pill, or, the silver bullet, if you will. So to me, there's this balance of tactical, practical, and then mindset, and mindset and skills. And this is something that I always loved that Xander taught from day one, which is what he calls the success hierarchy. And most people like to focus on like the tools, the skills, and the systems that will create success for you. But really, that's just the top of the pyramid. Below that, the foundation of the pyramid is your intention and your energy. And then it's your mindset and belief system. And the thing is that if you don't have those solid two foundations built, nothing else matters. And so there's so many people, it's like they're trying to build a skyscraper, but they have a swamp foundation, so they're never going to do it. So the vast majority of the work that we do is really on those foundational levels. It's building the right mindset. And it's not the sexy stuff. Like, it's not the sexy stuff. And that's what people don't want to buy, the not sexy stuff, right? But if you really want to be successful and you really want to build a business.
Can you give examples when you say not the sexy stuff? What do you mean?
Okay, making sure that you have like your routine dialed in, making sure that you're doing the daily outreach. Like nobody likes reaching out to prospects, but like guess what? You got to do that every day if you want to build a successful business. Like as much as you just want to like flip a button and then just have like all these amazing leads coming to you, like you got to be consistent with it. Like consistency is not sexy.
No.
We want to do the one thing. We want to get the hit and do it once. Like doing a podcast for every year, like, because it's not sexy. Like, oh, how did you write the book? Well, I sat down every day for this many days and I just wrote. Like, that's not sexy. I want to know the framework that I can do it in half the time or do it quicker. So like success is the ruthless mastery of the basics, in my opinion. And that's something that Xander's always said as well, which I loved. It's like, it's mastering these basics, these little things, the details. Like, how can you expect to change the world if you can't make your bed in the morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these little things. You can't keep a decluttered home. Like if your desk is cluttered and full of crap, like how do you expect to have a decluttered mind? How can you expect to show up for other people if you can't show up for yourself first? And that's the real work. It's the work. It's the inside out. It's like, how can you show up for yourself? How can you change what's within yourself and overcome the limiting beliefs and the fears that come up from doing all this work? And as soon as you do that, and this is what I've seen literally thousands of times with thousands of people, like it's all an inner game. It's a reflection of the inner game. And when you can master that and you can be committed to that practice, which is not fun, which is facing fears, which is overcoming limiting beliefs, which is doing the hard work, doing the non-sexy stuff, then things start to open up for you. And then the tactical works. And then you find the opportunities that come to you in different ways. So it's always kind of a balance though of like the tactical, practical, and the mindset and beliefs and the foundations. But you have to start at the foundations, and that's what's worked for us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you can't say that stuff enough. Like, I a few months ago, I was, on my friend's podcast and she said like, what's really changed, and everything's just got a lot simpler. I said in that moment that, if I nail diet, exercise, and sleep, like everything else sort of works out. And I think that simplicity scares people sometimes, but, I'll double down on that. Right. And it is boring. It is tedious. Like, my most recent, I'll call it annoyance. People are always wanting updates. Yeah. What's it like? What's it like to be writing a book? What's it like to be doing a pod? It's like, honestly, dude, I'm working on it. It's just boring. Like I'm living for the next one every single time, the next newsletter, the next pod, the next little outreach I can do to get the book out there. So, again, it's not sexy and it's not the good answer that everybody wants to hear, but, I think it's the right one.
I agree, man. It ain't sexy, but it gets the job done.
Yeah. So I want to finish with a couple things. One, I would say the silver lining to this piece that I do truly believe in is, because again, it's not fun to think about that. Okay, like the secret to writing a book is just sitting down and writing. The secret to success is making my bed, maintaining good relationships, being consistent in my practices. Okay, cool. Thanks for telling me that discipline yields success, right? The silver lining in it all is I do truly believe in this power of alignment, this power of the universe. I quote this often from Stephen Pressfield's The Artist's Journey. He says it like this: it operates in real time and in the real world. It is connected to forces unconstrained by time and space, by reason or by nature's laws. It is capable of summoning allies and assistants and of concentrating them on your behalf and in your cause. These forces are not only of the imagination, ideas, insights, wisdom, breakthroughs in your life and work, but also practical material apparitions like friends and allies, connections, places to stay, money. He basically says, once you start doing all that stuff, forces come to your aid, right? Things help in your cause. I want to ask you, you talk about Xander a lot. I assume Xander was a piece of alignment. Is there other things that you've noticed to subscribe and tell the listeners, hey, like once you get going, like, don't worry, it's not all on you?
Yes, absolutely. I love that question. And this to me, like, if you want the secret or the shortcut to success, it's this right here. Like, it really, really is. It's It's following the impulses and following that yellow brick road. When you're attracted to an idea or an opportunity or a desire, you feel pulled in that direction. Don't pump the brakes. Follow that. See where that goes. So I'll give a perfect story and example. After I quit my job, and this was one of the stepping stones that actually led me to connecting with Xander as well, I started doing a whole kind of big brain search of like, well, what do I enjoy doing? What do I like? And I started understanding. I watched a TED Talk from, I forget who it was from, but it was on the education system. And it was like one of the top TED Talks on the education system. And after my experience in college of still graduating and working at a startup and getting my own experience in college, like I was very passionate about seeing like how broken the system really was. And I was lucky that I went to a school that saw that and decided to graduate me, even though I wasn't in school for the last 2 years. Like they were still able to graduate me and I was able to work with them because they're like, this is what it's about. And I was really appreciative of that. So shout out to Miami of Ohio, big fan of the entrepreneurship department there. But most people don't have that. And the whole system as it is in its own way has not evolved. So I was like very passionate about education system and I want to be involved in, maybe it's teaching, I don't know what it is, but something around the education system. So that was like the impulse that got me into the game, was like, I want to learn more about the education system. I have this desire, or I want to figure out more about this. So what did I do? The next thing that came to me was I had a really good relationship with my old principal in high school. And I know that he moved to Japan to be the founding headmaster of a school in Japan. And so I want to hit him up and be like, what is he doing? Because the school, from what I did the research, I was researching the school and it sounded like a really cool, innovative thing. They had a mindfulness section in their curriculum. So I'm like, let me hit him up. So I just get on a Skype call with him to catch up with him. I'm asking about it. And he said, Josh, like I could sit here and tell you about it, or you can come out here and experience it for yourself. Like, if you want to come out here and do like a teaching fellowship, like we'll pay for your flight out here. We'll give you a stipend to come out here and be a part of the student body and be a part of the atmosphere. So I'm like, yes, please. That sounds great to me. Said yes to that. Next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Japan to touch and feel and breathe like this innovative school. And I'm learning more about education. And then that takes it to the next step further. And I'm like learning about the coaching space through this. I was starting to read the Simon Sinek book that I came across and seeing what he's doing and noticing that there's these people that are in the education space, but they're creating their own curriculum. And that's what led me to this thing and this thing. And the next thing you know, right? So it's like this combination of like, okay, education, I'm interested in this. Like, what's the next step? Who can I reach out to that I know about this? And then it's a scavenger hunt. You follow the breadcrumbs. It's a scavenger hunt that leads you to like this incredible opportunity of getting paid to fly to Japan. Like, and I was saying to myself, like, I can't believe this just happened to me. And one of my friends said, yeah, because you took the action to get there. Like, don't you see that? Right. So it's that kind of combination again there, but that's a perfect example, I think, of in terms of alignment. And when I was aligned and I felt called on that alignment of education somehow, I didn't know where it was going to lead to, but I felt aligned and pulled to do that. So I took the step, and then these creative forces, like put me on a plane to Japan. Like, isn't that crazy? Like I couldn't have planned that if I wanted to.
No, it's like, it's this beautiful thing where it's totally logical and absolutely mystical and crazy. It's like
absolutely.
Both of those things can be true. Well, dude, thank you for that story. That's great. Man, I could talk to you for hours.
I know,
but we are running low on time. I think just selfishly, last thing, man, I want to know what I'm into with this half-Ironman. I took this on just as a stepping stone to doing a full. So I want to do a full in the spring of next year. I'm about, let's see, 45 days out. Like, what am I getting into? What, you got any tips, suggestions, and are you doing more yourself?
Yes. This is a whole other conversation as well, because on multiple levels, but so I've done maybe 5 or 6 halves. So fun. Have you done any like Olympics or anything before? This is the first try you're doing.
Yeah. I've done a full marathon twice, but I've never done a try.
Okay. You're fine. You're fine. That's totally good. Most people like to want to start with the smallest thing. And if you're in shape and you're someone who can adapt, like I say, go for either Olympic distance first, or which is half of a half, or right for a half. I think you're totally fine. It's so much fun. Like I caught the bug. Either you're going to catch the bug or you're not. So either way is great. I would wait to decide if you want to do the full till after you do the half, because it'll be very clear if you're just like, after you're like, oh my God, that was so cool. Like I want to do this again. Or you're just like, regardless, as soon as you're done, you're going to be like, screw that. I'm never doing that again. And then a week later, you're like, all right, when's the next one?
Right.
So that's what you might experience. But when I was training for a full with my cousin, trained the whole time, 9 months, shipped the bike out there a week before, ready to go, locked and loaded, tapering down. And as I'm tapering down, my last run on my entire training schedule, I pop a shin splint. I have a shin splint that comes up. And over the next couple of days, it gets worse to the point where it's like a mini stress fracture. After all the training, I overtrained a bit. And as I was tapering down, it started to show itself. So I had to make a very tough decision like 2 days before and pull out of the race, which was really challenging because I was ready to do it. I still flew out and supported my cousin, and he did it. He crushed it, got an amazing time, finished it, no problem. And that was a whole other journey around a whole other conversation around journey and destination. But my advice, what you're in for, is like, have fun with it. And like, don't forget that you're there to have fun. I got really serious and regimented with like, I got to do everything perfectly in the training and this. Like, remember that you're signed up for this for fun. Like, have fun with it. It's a fun thing. It's supposed to be fun. It's going to challenge you, obviously, yes. But like, don't overtrain, have fun with it, trust yourself, and just like have a good time.
Dude, I can't hear that enough. That's great advice. I know there's a competitive side of me that's going to get excited in the middle of the race and try to push myself. And at the same time, like, if I'm just totally objective, like, I signed up for this for the experience. I signed up to see like what it's like swimming a full mile with a bunch of people around, what it's like to do 54 miles on a bike, in that environment. And then what it's like to cover 70, total miles, and finish, with my favorite part, which is running. That's certainly my favorite part of the race. So I think that's really good advice. Have fun. That's great. Well, keep the eyes wide.
That's it. Once you get to your feet, man, you're going to be golden. That's the feeling of relief. I know I was the same way. I was a runner too. So like, once I ditched the bike and I was on the feet, I was like, all right, we're good. I don't care about anything else. Like, we are good now. We are chilling.
Oh, cool, man. Well, let's cap it by giving everybody the best way to get in touch with you. How do people follow the pod, follow you, et cetera?
Totally. So Instagram is probably going to be the best way. That's where I post a lot of highlights. So at Joshua Dean Church, I'm sure you'll share that in the notes. And then if you go to my website, joshuadeanchurch.com, that's DEAN, joshuadeanchurch.com. Sign up for the newsletter. So I send out a couple notes, like the one around the hanging photos, just little notes like that. I usually do 1 or 2 a month. So it's nothing crazy, but that's definitely a good way to kind of stay up to date with the latest as well. I've got an amazing retreat coming up. I'm planning for January with a good friend of mine. So it's a good way to stay up to date with any of the updates around things like that and just kind of with the latest, but Instagram would be the best bet. And feel free to reach out, DM me. I love having conversations with people and connecting just on all the above.
Beautiful, man. Glad we got it in. We got over the tech hump. And
we did.
I appreciate it, man. Enjoy yourself surfing today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, brother. I will. And I'm excited to get you on Find the Others podcast as well. It's going to be fun. In person.
You got it. Hey, it's Bobby. Thanks for listening to today's show. For more, follow Student of Intention at www.studentofintention.com. And remember, don't wait. Start small. Learn as you go.